My name is Lyra Keller, and at 29 years old, I watched my family completely erase me. You have always been our greatest failure, my mother murmured, her voice chillingly serene as she slid a fountain pen across the mahogany dining table. Around us sat 12 of our closest relatives, watching in absolute silence. They were waiting for me to sign away every shred of my birthright. That afternoon, exactly 3 years ago, I walked out of that ancestral home with nothing. No financial safety net, no family ties, and nowhere to go. My older sister Alara inherited everything. The $4 million estate, the sprawling lakefront villa in Silver Bay, and the family's entire investment portfolio. My father couldn't even bring himself to meet my eye as I left. But what none of them anticipated, not my mother, my father, or my flawlessly polished sister, was the bombshell. A routine phone call between two corporate lawyers would uncover 3 years down the line. When the reality of my new life finally reached my father, he could only repeat the same 2 words over and over. Like a man watching his entire empire collapse in slow motion. Before we dive into the wreckage of that afternoon, take a brief moment to subscribe to Family Confessions. But only if you believe that deep betrayal can become the very fuel that drives you to rebuild a life no one ever thought you could achieve. I'd also love to connect with you. Where are you listening from today, and what is the weather like outside your window? Pour yourself a warm cup of tea, settle in, and let me recount exactly how it all went down on a bleak Sunday in early March. The summons had arrived a few days prior on a rainy Wednesday night. I was sitting on the floor of my cramped studio apartment in Brookline, surrounded by textile swatches and blueprint layouts for my very first solo interior design client. It was an $800 living room refresh, and I was incredibly proud of it. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Family gathering this Sunday. Do not be late. No warmth, no context, just a cold command. I almost stayed home. There was an unfamiliar, sharp edge to her words that felt deeply rehearsed. Yet, despite years of emotional distance, I always showed up when they called. That loyalty had always been my fatal flaw. If you think my parents were completely justified in cutting me off to protect the family estate, comment, I support them. But if you feel this staggering weight of being erased by your own blood, comment, that's favoritism. Let me know your thoughts before we move to the dining room. The drive from Brookline to Westbridge County took nearly 3 agonizing hours through a relentless downpour. The windshield wipers beat against the glass like a frantic metronome. When I finally turned onto Hawthorne Ridge, the family mansion loomed through the gray fog-tall stone pillars, dark shutters, and a chillingly perfect symmetry designed to intimidate anyone who dared step inside. I spent my entire childhood there. Yet it never once felt like a home. Stepping into the dining room, the atmosphere felt entirely staged. 12 relatives sat in rigid silence. My grandmother, Evelyn, stared fixedly at her lap near the window. Uncle Marcus sat with his jaw clenched tight, while Aunt Lillian examined the silverware. At the head of the table sat Mr. Caldwell, the family's longtime estate attorney. Adjusting his thin wire glasses over a thick leather binder, my father, Jonathan Keller, stood aggressively behind his chair with crossed arms, refusing to offer a greeting. My mother merely gestured toward a solitary empty chair at the very foot of the table. And there, seated directly at my father's right hand, was Alara. She looked immaculate in a tailored blazer, her diamond earrings catching the chandelier light. She didn't bother looking at me. Her smug composure proved she knew exactly what was about to unfold. Resting on the table before me was a legal document with my name typed across the heading. Before I could even scan the first page, my father broke the silence. Sit down, Lyra. Let's get this over with. The leather chair felt freezing beneath me. With a curt nod from my father, Mr. Caldwell began reading in that detached, robotic monotone that legal professionals use to dismantle human lives. The entirety of the Keller estate is hereby transferred exclusively to Alara Simone Keller. The terms rolled over me like a wave. The Hawthorne Ridge Mansion, the Silver Bay Villa, the liquid investment accounts, and the substantial trust fund established by my late grandfather. The total valuation was $4 million. every single asset, dollar, and childhood memory was designated for Alara. My name was explicitly omitted from every single clause. Stunned, I looked up at my father. "And what about me?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He simply adjusted his gold cufflink and stared at the wall somewhere over my left shoulder. Have you ever been completely ignored by someone who is supposed to protect you? What would you do in this exact moment? Would you scream or would you stay silent? Type your reactions below as we find out my mother's final blow. The silence in the room grew suffocating. That was when my mother delivered the blow she had clearly spent weeks preparing. "You have always been our greatest failure, Lyra," she stated, her tone as casual as someone reading off a mundane grocery list. It was final, cold, and entirely devoid of hesitation. The room remained utterly breathless. No one defended me. Uncle Marcus shifted uncomfortably, but kept his mouth shut. Aunt Lillian suddenly found the grain of the wood table deeply fascinating. My cousins purposely averted their eyes, treating me as though I had already vanished from existence. Alara remained perfectly still, though I caught the sharp, fleeting twitch at the edge of her lips or quiet, triumphant smirk. Mr. Caldwell quietly slid the paperwork closer to me, along with a heavy pen. "This is a formal relinquishment of your inheritance rights," he explained softly. "We require your signature to finalize the asset transfer." Bright yellow tabs marked every line where my name was required. It was incredibly calculated, prepared weeks before I ever stepped foot into the house. I looked at the pen, then met my mother's daring glare. She was practically begging me to throw a tantrum, to scream, to prove her right. Instead, I picked up the pen. To my own amazement, my fingers were completely steady. "I understand perfectly," I murmured. I signed every page without a single tear. The second the ink hit the paper, I pushed my chair back and stood up. Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody asked if I was okay as I walked away. A palpable wave of relief washed over the room, not for my well-being, but because the uncomfortable chore was completed for them. Walking down the grand hallway, my heels echoed loudly against the hardwood. I passed the family portrait gallery. There was Alara in her Ivy League graduation gown. Alara accepting a prestigious award, and Alara vacationing with my parents in Italy. There wasn't a single photograph of me on that wall. Not one. I opened the heavy front door and stepped out into the freezing rain. Just as I reached my car, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Alara. "No hard feelings, sis. It's just business." I stared at the screen, let out a dry laugh, and deleted it forever. If you received a text like that from a sibling who just took everything from you, how would you respond? Would you text back a piece of your mind? Or would you delete it like I did? Comment, fight back, or delete. The long drive back to Brookline was a blur of static and rain. 20 minutes down the highway, the weight finally crushed me. I pulled over onto the shoulder, killed the engine, and just sat in the dark. Vehicles flew past in streaks of blinding white and red light while rain hammered against the roof. I didn't cry or scream. I just sat with the agonizing realization that my own flesh and blood had systematically erased me. Nearly an hour passed before I finally restarted the car, when I unlocked my tiny apartment. Everything was exactly as I had left it. Fabric samples scattered on the floor, design layouts taped to the walls, and a half-eaten bowl of breakfast cereal on the counter. I opened my banking app. My entire life savings amounted to exactly $3,200. No safety net, no family connections, and absolutely no one coming to rescue me. That night, sitting on the kitchen floor, drafted a list not of what they had stolen, but of what still belonged completely to me. It was a brutally short list, but it was mine. The true fallout began the following Tuesday. A polite email landed in my inbox. "Hi, Lyra. We've decided to go in a different direction for our remodel. Best of luck." No real explanation. I sent a professional reply and tried to move on. But 4 days later, a much larger project collapsed. It was a comprehensive kitchen renovation I had spent weeks mapping out. The homeowner called me directly, her voice strained with awkward hesitation. "We've heard you are currently navigating some intense personal and legal instability," she said defensively. We feel it's best to work with a firm that is a bit more secure right now. My stomach plummeted. Who exactly told you that? I pressed. A long pause followed. I'd really prefer not to say, she whispered before hanging up. 2 major cancellations in less than 7 days. Both clients used suspiciously similar language. And both walked away for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with the quality of my design work. I stopped expecting the world to be fair after that. I took every demeaning micro job I could find. $200 color consultations. $800 apartment refreshes. I began eating cheap cereal for dinner multiple nights a week out of pure financial survival. Rock bottom is entirely silent. It's the quiet anxiety of stretching a single box of pasta across 3 days and calling it portion control. Do you think someone from my family was deliberately sabotaging my independent business? Or was it just terrible luck? Share your theories in the comments section below while I make a desperate phone call. By the 3rd week of struggling to buy basic groceries, I swallowed my pride and reached out to the only relative who had ever shown me a shred of genuine kindness, Uncle Marcus. He was my father's younger brother, a gentler man who had occasionally complimented my creative eye. I called him from my desk, my voice trembling. "Marcus, I need help," I admitted openly. "Not money. Just a professional reference, a corporate connection, or a single lead. Anything." A heavy, agonizing silence stretched across the line. "Lyra," he began, his voice laced with protective caution, "I love you. You know that. But I simply cannot get involved in this family dispute." The line went completely dead in that exact moment. The harsh reality crystallized. There was no middle ground. There was the elite Keller empire, and then there was me, completely isolated. But fate works in mysterious ways. That very evening, an inquiry landed in my inbox from an unrecognized domain. It was a request for an extensive penthouse design consultation in Hartford Heights, with a budget explicitly listed as entirely flexible. It felt far too convenient, almost like a trap. I nearly deleted it, but desperation forced me to schedule the meeting. 6 weeks into my isolation, I was sitting in a quiet coffee shop on Chapel Street on a rainy Saturday, sketching tile patterns for a minor bathroom remodel, my only remaining source of income. "Lyra, I thought that was you," a voice interrupted. I looked up to see Sienna Clark, a prominent local real estate mogul whose home office I had designed a year prior. She sat down across from me without asking, her face a mix of guilt and intense curiosity. "Are you actually still taking design clients?" I frowned, setting my pencil down. "Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be?" Sienna uncomfortably twirled her coffee cup. "Because your sister Alara explicitly told a room full of developers that you weren't." My chest tightened instantly. "She claimed you completely abandoned your business due to a severe personal breakdown and ongoing legal troubles within the family." The pieces of the puzzle violently snapped into place. The sudden cancellations, the awkward client phone calls, the icy distance from local brokers, it wasn't bad luck. Alara hadn't just stolen my inheritance. She was actively executing a calculated campaign to ensure I could never rebuild a life. She was planting poisonous rumors in elite rooms where I couldn't defend myself. No fingerprints, just absolute devastation. If you discovered your own sibling was actively destroying your professional reputation out of pure malice, what would you do? Comment A, to confront them immediately, or B, to stay silent and plot your next move. The burning urge to call Alara and scream down the phone almost consumed me, but I forced myself to take a deep, freezing breath. I looked at Sienna, forced a calm, composed smile, and said, "Thank you for telling me the truth." Sitting in that coffee shop booth with a nearly depleted bank account, I made a definitive vow. I would not beg. I would not scream, and I would not confront my sister. Instead, I was going to build an empire so massive that her malice could never touch it, before completely cutting ties. I called my mother one last time. She answered on the 3rd ring with a cold, singular acknowledgement. "Lyra, did you know about it?" I asked bluntly. The dining room ambush? The lawyers? The paperwork? Was it all a pre-planned performance? A long pause ensued. We did what was necessary for the preservation of the family name. Your sister has never given us a single reason to worry. Neither did I whispered, though I knew the words were entirely wasted on her. Lyra, my mother added, her voice adopting that artificially soft, condescending tone she used when pretending to be reasonable. If you had simply listened to us, gone to corporate law school, and chosen a stable path, none of this would have happened. There it was, the ultimate truth of the Keller household. In their world, love was entirely conditional on total submission. Because I chose creative independence, I was deemed entirely worthless. This is the last time you will ever hear my voice, I stated flatly before hanging up. 4 months later, Alara sent an email with the subject line, "Thinking of you." It was a lengthy, heavily constructed message filled with hollow concern, claiming she had no hand in our parents' legal decisions. I didn't reply. 2 weeks later, she sent another. "I hear you're drowning financially. If you need money, just ask. You don't have to suffer alone." It wasn't an act of kindness. It was a calculated attempt to make me beg so she could feel superior. I didn't respond to that one either. Instead, I created a hidden folder on my laptop, labeled it simply V, and moved both messages inside. My sister never did anything without a strategic motive. She was building a paper trail, and instinctively, I knew I needed to keep one too. Why do you think Alara was sending those emails? Was she genuinely feeling guilty, or was she setting a trap to protect herself legally? Write your theories in the comments below while we head to the penthouse. The Hartford Heights penthouse inquiry turned out to be my salvation. It belonged to Eleanor Vance, a 62-year-old self-made real estate tycoon with sharp eyes, heavy silver rings, and a powerhouse demeanor. We met on the 18th floor overlooking the city skyline. The space was an absolute disaster. Zone-gutted walls, exposed copper pipes, and unfinished demolition. Most designers would have panicked. I saw a blank canvas. I didn't offer a desperate sales pitch. For 40 minutes, I silently paced the concrete floors, tracking the natural light patterns, studying the structural angles, and feeling the texture of the raw brick. Eleanor watched me intently from the doorway with an enigmatic smile. "You read the language of structural space entirely differently than anyone else I've hired," she remarked smoothly. "That is a rare gift." That project consumed the next 5 months of my life. With a massive $120,000 budget on the line, I barely slept. I scavenged through elite architectural salvage yards, collaborated with local artisans, and obsessed over every square inch. When it was unveiled, Eleanor walked through the completed penthouse in total silence. After what felt like an eternity, she turned to me and said, "I have 3 major commercial colleagues who desperately need your vision." That single sentence permanently altered my trajectory. Within 60 days, I was managing for massive corporate redesigns. Over dinner one evening, Eleanor looked at me over a glass of wine. "I'm expanding into boutique hospitality properties," she mentioned casually. "If you're willing to invest your time and creativity, we should partner up. But understand this, Lyra, I never invest in people who need to be saved. I invest in people who simply require a door." 8 months after being brutally disinherited, I packed everything I owned into my dented 12-year-old Honda Civic and moved to Asheville, North Carolina Mountain City, bursting with independent creators who built their own destinies. I established a formal LLC under the name Lumen Interiors. Eleanor backed the venture with a $150,000 corporate investment. Governed by strict, transparent legal contracts, I pulled 14-hour workdays, frequently falling asleep at my drafting table with pencils still clutched in my hand. I completely deactivated my personal social media accounts. The toxic world of Connecticut felt like a distant nightmare. Then, on a crisp Tuesday morning, my phone lit up with a text from Ethan Cross, an old college friend who is now a prominent corporate real estate attorney in Charlotte. "Is this actually you running the hottest new design firm in North Carolina? Let's grab coffee." Do you think partnering with Eleanor was the ultimate turning point? Or was the ghost of my family about to catch up with me? Type success or danger below as we enter the corporate boardroom. Ethan Cross looked exactly the same, tall, sharp, and commanding. We met at a crowded cafe in downtown Charlotte, ordering matching black coffees. After catching up on his legal career, he asked how Lumen Interiors was scaling. I gave him the broad strokes, but as the conversation deepened, I found myself confiding in him about the dining room ambush, the signed relinquishment, and my family's absolute silence. Ethan set his coffee mug down, his expression hardening instantly. "Wait a minute," he interrupted. "Your sister is Alara Keller, correct? Employed at a prominent corporate law firm in Graybridge." I nodded, confused. "Yes. Why?" "Her name appeared across a high-profile commercial property deal I reviewed last week," Ethan explained, leaning over the table. "She was explicitly copied on an extensive email chain between a national brokerage firm and a major southeastern property development group, Lyra. In those communications, she was actively warning executives away from you." The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. "What do you mean?" "She explicitly used your full name, detailing that you were highly unstable, completely unreliable, and cut off by your family due to severe corporate fraud and financial misconduct," Ethan said quietly. The coffee turned completely bitter in my mouth. Alara hadn't just sabotaged my local clients in Connecticut. She was actively tracking my growth and attempting to poison my corporate expansion in the South. She was systematically trying to suffocate my livelihood before it could even take root. "Don't react emotionally just yet," Ethan warned, his eyes locking onto mine. "Let me initiate a comprehensive private investigation into these communication channels. If she has legally interfered with your active corporate contracts, she hasn't just been a terrible sister, she's committed a serious, actionable offense." By the 18-month mark in Asheville, Lumen Interiors had successfully executed 12 massive commercial projects, generating over $1.2 million in annual revenue. Eleanor and I made a major power move, acquiring a severely neglected, historic 3-story brick building in South Asheville. Despite local critics calling it a financial suicide mission, we completely transformed it into an elite retail and design hub, netting over $340,000 in pure profit. Suddenly, my name and face were being featured in prominent architectural journals. I hired a full-time project manager, an assistant designer, and a corporate accountant. Then, one evening, Eleanor dropped a listing on my desk. A prime commercial parcel of land just went up for sale, right on the border of Westbridge County, Connecticut. "You discovered an illegal paper trail proving a family member was actively sabotaging your career out of pure jealousy. Would you sue them immediately, or would you let your skyrocketing success do the talking?" Comment: sue or succeed. 3 years after being completely erased, I walked directly into the Connecticut Real Estate Association's exclusive annual charity gala at the Grand Hartford Hotel. Eleanor had insisted I attend as her full corporate partner. I wore a minimalist black silk dress with absolutely no jewelry, had nothing left to prove to high society. And for the first time, that wasn't an act. The grand ballroom was bathed in dazzling gold light as hundreds of elite real estate executives mingled. And then I spotted them. My father was standing near the luxury ice sculptures, deep in conversation with Mr. Caldwell. My mother sat at a VIP table, wrapped in flawless pearls, with Aunt Lillian beside her. And there was Alara, holding court at the center of a circle of prominent developers. Laughing smoothly, Eleanor lightly touched my forearm. "Breathe, partner," she whispered. As we glided across the polished floor, my mother turned her head. Her champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Alara followed her gaze, her eyes locking onto mine. The laughter died in her throat. Eleanor walked right up to their table, extending a confident hand to the attorney. "Gerald, wonderful to see you again," she greeted effortlessly. She then turned, gesturing directly toward me. "I believe you all know my primary corporate partner, Lyra Keller, the brilliant creative force and majority owner behind Lumen Interiors. The silence that blanketed the immediate area was absolute. My father turned around slowly, a mixture of utter shock and deep confusion flooding his face. He looked at me as if I were a ghost. My mother quickly recovered her mask, flashing a hollow smile. "Lyra, darling, what an absolute surprise. We have been so deeply worried about you," she lied, reaching for my hand. I let her touch my fingers for a single, icy second before smoothly withdrawing. Alara stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she tried to calculate my sudden status. "We heard you were doing some minor local decorating work down south," she remarked with a dismissive, patronizing tilt of her head. "How sweet." Eleanor let out a sharp, quiet laugh that cut through the room like glass. "Decorating," Eleanor countered, her voice carrying beautifully across the quiet circle. "Lumen Interiors currently commands a multi-million-dollar commercial development portfolio across 3 states. I certainly wouldn't classify a powerhouse enterprise like that as decorating." One of the elite developers beside Mr. Caldwell gasped, looking at me in shock. "Wait, you're the Lyra Keller who owns Lumen? We just signed a massive development deal with your firm in Graybridge." Alara's entire face drained of color, her perfect posture visibly crumbling as she realized the sister she had cast out was now standing on top of her world. Seeing the absolute shock on my family's faces was a massive moment of vindication. Have you ever had a moment where you completely shocked people who doubted you? Tell me your stories below while we uncover the ultimate legal number. A week following the High Society Gala, the ultimate bomb dropped. Ethan called me into his Charlotte office, laying a thick financial file on his desk. "We initiated the routine title searches and financial compliance checks for the Westbridge land purchase adjacent to your parents' estate," Ethan explained, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. Naturally, I had to contact the neighboring estate's legal counsel to verify property boundaries. It was Mr. Caldwell. I leaned forward. And how did he react? The moment I identified the buying entity as Lumen Interiors LLC, owned solely by Lyra Keller, there was a dead silence on the line for a full 15 seconds, Ethan recounted. He then demanded certified financial verification for compliance. "So I explicitly sent him over your entire corporate portfolio, active banking liquidities, the commercial real estate holdings, and our projected revenue streams. The total verified valuation of your independent assets stands at exactly $9.4 million. $9.4 million. Nearly double the entire value of the inheritance estate they had used to humiliate me 3 years prior." Mr. Caldwell immediately called my father that afternoon. Thanks to Ethan's legal network, I learned exactly what transpired in that study. When Caldwell delivered the official asset report, my father collapsed into his leather chair, repeating, "That is impossible. That is entirely impossible," like a broken record. My mother sat frozen by the window, her knuckles turning white around her teacup. In the adjoining room, Alara was frantically screaming into her phone, realizing her web of lies had completely unraveled. But we weren't finished. Ethan systematically compiled the entire chain of defamatory emails Alara had sent to corporate brokers, which legally constituted tortious interference with business relationships. He drafted a blistering 5-page formal cease and desist notice, attaching every single time-stamped email, and sent it directly via certified mail to the managing partners at Alara's prestigious law firm. The fallout inside her firm was swift and devastating. To avoid a massive corporate scandal, the senior executives stripped Alara of her elite client-facing duties. She wasn't fired, that would be too public. Instead, she was quietly demoted to a windowless basement office, reassigned to tedious internal compliance reviews. No more corporate lunches, no more high-value negotiations, and no more elite status. Her professional reputation eroded to absolutely nothing, destroyed entirely by the very malicious tactics she had chosen to weaponize against me. If your father sent you a handwritten letter begging for forgiveness after discovering you were worth nearly $10 million, would you accept his apology or leave him unread? Comment, forgive, or walk away? Bye. My father sent several handwritten letters to Asheville. Lyra, I am incredibly proud of the empire you've built. I had no idea. Please come home, he wrote. I read those words sitting on my porch, watching the Blue Ridge Mountains glow gold in the twilight. He was proud of the $9.4 million valuation. But he had felt absolutely nothing when I was drowning at rock bottom. I had Ethan return a simple response. Thank you, Dad, but I don't require pride that arrives 3 years late. I built my life without your validation. I will continue without it. Then, my mother called. You've successfully proved your point, Lyra, she said, her voice finally cracking with emotion. Now please, come home. I didn't build an empire to prove a point, Mother. I replied with absolute serenity. I built a life, and Asheville is my home now. Even Alara sent a desperate, unvarnished email. I know I crossed the line. I know what I did was monstrous. Can we please just talk? It took me an hour to draft a 4-sentence reply, Alara. I genuinely forgive you for my own peace of mind. However, forgiveness does not mean you are permitted back into my life. I truly wish you well. Instead of building a spiteful mansion on the Westbridge land, I designed and funded the Lumina Collective, a massive, state-of-the-art co-working sanctuary filled with elite design studios and tools dedicated entirely to young, independent artists who have brilliant ideas but no doors open to them yet. I built the exact rescue net I desperately needed when I was sitting on my kitchen floor with nothing. Today, Lumina Interiors employs 14 incredible professionals, and our active portfolio exceeds $10 million. Setting strict boundaries with toxic family isn't an act of cruelty or abandonment. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. The absolute best revenge isn't a loud confrontation. It is building a life so entirely abundant, peaceful, and successful that their opinions no longer have a single place to exist. If you would make the exact same choice to walk away, build your own empire, and protect your peace, comment, I would do the same. If you believe families should be forgiven at all costs, comment, come back. Thank you for listening to Family Confessions. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video to help someone else find the strength to rebuild. I'll see you in the next story.